There is a lot to like about this latest commitment to Penn State. Amauri Polydor joins the Nittany Lions class of 2026. However, I do have one concern.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football recruiting, and thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. We are talking about the latest commitment to the class of 2026. That is Amauri Polydor, three-star cornerback out of Maryland. So there are some positives here, a lot of positives here. As Penn State gets its sixth overall defensive back commitment, I do have one concern, though, about this. So we're going to talk about that, but I want to begin with the player himself because I don't want to dismiss this commitment. This was something that was expected. We talked about this on the show throughout the past couple of weeks that, hey, a prediction went in, so it's just a matter of time before Penn State actually lands Polydor. And it happened. Official visit weekend, and Penn State wastes no time getting a commitment. Hopefully that can maybe spark some other ones, create a domino effect. But Polydor, if you're looking for a defensive back that has just pure ball skills, that is Polydor. Polydor had 8 interceptions in his junior season. So he has an eye for finding the football through the air. Now he is transferring to St. Francis. And that's a big deal. That is a big deal. For those who aren't familiar, St. Francis Academy in Maryland is the powerhouse of high school football in the state of Maryland. There are a lot of other good schools. DeMatha, good count, so some people might be familiar with those. But it's St. Francis Academy that is truly one of the best. Schools won't even schedule them because of how good they are. So he is joining arguably the best program in the entire state of Maryland when it comes to high school football. So this rating, him being a 3-star, he's, I think, graded as an 85 or an 86 overall per On3 or the consensus ratings. It doesn't look great, but there is a common theme here among Penn State commitments, and these guys are typically underrated. Even someone like Kevin Brown. I continue to see highlights from Kevin Brown, who was just at another Penn State skills camp, and oh my goodness, how he is not a 5-star is beyond me, but that's besides the point here. Case in point, though, is that Polydor, he's a 3-star right now. He's probably going to end up finishing as a 4-star. He'll go up against better comparable competition. This move is necessary for him, but Penn State sees all of the necessary evaluations that they need to. They are not going off of everything that On3, 24/7 Rivals, ESPN say. If they believe somebody is worth taking a commitment from, they will take a commitment from them. This is not by, once again, these commitments do not happen by accident. So Polydor joins the class of 2026, 6th overall defensive back, 4th true cornerback, 4 cornerbacks in this class of 2026. Let's continue to talk about Polydor as a player. So with that being said, being able to get your hands on 8 interceptions, that requires a lot of IQ. That means that he just understands the game of football inside and out. So you couple with the ability to make plays, to be able to diagnose those plays, get a good read on the quarterback. It's instinctual. He has vision. He's listed at 6 foot, 175 pounds currently. He'll add the weight. He'll add weight. He's also a fearless tackler. I liked what I saw in his film in terms of tackling, because that's what Penn State is always looking for in a defensive back. Somebody that's just not only good in pass coverage, you're not afraid to go up and make a play and run defense. I've said that before and I'm going to say it again, but that is something that is consistent with Penn State defensive backs, is that you are looking for that player that is going to find the football regardless. So he can do it through the air. Well, he's going to have to do it on the ground as well. He's not afraid to make those plays, go make a hit as well, because some DBs would just rather play man-to-man coverage, back off in zone. He's not afraid to go into the pile and make a play on the football, on the ball carrier. Where would he fit in Jim Knowles' scheme? Well, it's a 4-2-5, so there's going to be plenty of opportunities for defensive backs to play. But I am going to get to that concern in just a moment that I did lead off with. So stay tuned for that. Jim Knowles, you could play him as a boundary defensive back, which is typically where he's been, or you could play him in the slot. So he has versatility that goes along with his capabilities as well. So he's somebody that could guard on the sidelines or somebody that plays exclusively in the slot. Polydor is a true cornerback, though, and not just a defensive back. Could he play safety? Absolutely. When you have 8 interceptions like that, so maybe they do eventually transition him to safety. I just see him more as a true cornerback, and that's what other people have said about his recruitment as well. So a lot of upside here. Once again, another recruitment that speaks to the fact that Penn State is trying to get to a commitment sooner rather than later because they don't want to wait. He had a visit set up with Michigan State. Do you want someone like Amauri Polydor, who still has untapped potential, needs to face better competition to really see his recruiting ranking get some credibility? Do you want him to go to Michigan State? Do you want him to be in the Big Ten? Do you want a school like West Virginia? He had offers from West Virginia, Michigan State, Maryland, SEC, South Carolina had offered him too. So he had SEC intrigue. That definitely wasn't, I don't think that was to the school that was pursuing him the most. Clearly it was Penn State, but there was the SEC allure. So he's an underrated player. However, he's certainly one that Penn State had prioritized here. Wouldn't take the commitment if they didn't believe it was necessary. Let me go back to the St. Francis part of this before we talk about the concern with this commitment, because there's 6 defensive backs here. That is a little concerning, and I'll explain why. St. Francis Academy, being the powerhouse that it is, Penn State has struggled to land commitments from there. I don't think they landed one a few years back, but they weren't able to maintain it. This has been a struggle for James Franklin to bridge that gap between Penn State and St. Francis Academy. Polydor might be the key to unlocking some of those relationships, which would be great. Now, Polydor he hasn't been at St. Francis forever. He's going there for one final season, but this just might be an avenue where down the road, you start to be able to chip away at that. And like I said, prioritize those relationships, because St. Francis Academy is a high school football powerhouse in the state of Maryland. And James Franklin, if he's going to dominate the state of Pennsylvania and then move back to Maryland, DC, Virginia, you want St. Francis Academy as one of those places to create a pipeline to Penn State. Now let's talk about the concern in all of this. Polydor becomes the 6th overall defensive back, 4th cornerback. Does that mean that this is going to jeopardize future defensive back commitments? It might. We'll discuss that on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. How does $200 in bonus bets sound? Well, if you are new to FanDuel, now's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. That's right, $200 in bonus bets to use on anything. NBA playoffs are still going on with the final series. Major League Baseball, off-season college football. If you get $200 in bonus bets, you can use it on anything FanDuel has to offer. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and even live during the finals. With player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. Now, if you want to bet on Penn State football in the offseason, you can as well. There are lines available for win totals. Do you think Penn State's going to have more or less than 10.5 wins? If you do, if you think one way or the other, head over to FanDuel.com. And remember, if you are new to FanDuel, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. At some point, Penn State has enough defensive backs, right? Right? In this class of 2026? No, because they still have multiple priority targets out there that are at the top of their list. Let me start by saying this. I don't believe that Polydor jeopardizes any future commitments for the likes of Joey O'Brien, in-state safety, arguably the top. Him and Kevin Brown are 1A, 1B, depending on who you ask. I like Kevin Brown a lot for obvious reasons. Joey O'Brien too. He's a safety. Now, Penn State already has 2 safety commits. Khary is one of them out of the state of Maryland, DeMatha High School, and then Matt Sieg in the state of Pennsylvania. So that's a free safety, strong safety, respectively. Joey O'Brien, though, is being recruited as a specialty athlete. He could play safety. He could play wide receiver. So I'm not going to say that, oh, Penn State doesn't have any room for another safety. That's not it. Penn State has plenty of room for Joey O'Brien. Same thing with Khary Adams. Adams, player out of the state of Maryland, he plays like a 5-star, even though the rankings might say differently. I think he's going to be a consensus 5-star when these rankings are finalized. He is a top 50 player right now, conservatively top 75 overall in the nation. So Penn State would not take a commitment from Polydor if it meant that, one, they're getting a quality player. Okay, that's what they're looking for above all else, is that you are going to get Polydor. You're getting Polydor, and that commitment matters to Penn State. That's not a sympathy commitment. They're not just taking that on accident. They took it because he's a good quality player with lots of upside. But if you have other priorities at that same position, at that same defensive back group, you don't want it to jeopardize that. Because yes, Joey O'Brien and Khary Adams are both, you can say this objectively, are better players and better prospects right now, and probably both have the higher ceiling than Polydor. It is okay to say that. So Penn State would not take that commitment if it meant that they weren't going to get O'Brien or Adams. It's still going to be stiff competition. You got to fend off the likes of Ohio State, Notre Dame, in both of these recruitments, Oregon. O'Brien and Adams, Penn State strongly in the mix. I think they're right there with the likes of, I think it's really going to come down to Penn State or Notre Dame for both. I really do. I think it's going to come down to either of those two schools for both Adams and O'Brien. Penn State runs a 4.25. So there is a need for a defensive back here. You're going to lose Zach Wheatley. You're going to lose A.J. Harris. And I know they have guys like Darius Dixon that are going to be coming up from the class of 2025 that will make an impact sooner rather than later. But you are going to lose some starters after this season, which means that, okay, if you're going to have this open competition, you need more players there. And as we've discussed before, Penn State runs a defense that requires more than just 11 starters. They are going to rotate people in frequently, even if they're, okay, yeah, you have your starter, but they like to have 2-3 deep to run the defense effectively, or they play 20, 22, up to 25 players and have them be reliable. In short, I don't think they're going to miss out on Khary Adams or Joey O'Brien because of this commitment. From what I've gathered is that Penn State is in the driver's seat for definitely Khary Adams. I'm not guaranteeing a commitment. I just like where Penn State stands. Same thing with Joey O'Brien. I think Penn State has the advantage here, and they should be expected to land both of these commitments. I am not guaranteeing it. I'm not trying to put in a subtle prediction. I'm just saying I like where they stand, but things could change, obviously, between now and those commitment dates. I do want to add this. Penn State can't just continue to take defensive back after defensive back. They were leading for Dorian Barney at one point in time, player that transferred out of the state of Pennsylvania. He's currently down in the state of Georgia. He's on his visit for Texas A&M. That's been the school that's always been more or less quietly leading for him. As much of a push that Penn State made, I don't know that they're going to land him. So that's what that kind of speaks to, is that it's not going to hinder their recruitments for Adams and O'Brien, but I think we can potentially write off Dorian Barney. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong about that, because I would like to see them get Adams, Barney, and O'Brien, but at some point there is a limit. Or you're going to start flipping people to wide receiver. Someone like David Davis has the versatility to be a wide receiver, even though he's been listed as an athlete. He did recently post that, hey, I'm a cornerback, or lockdown you, along the lines of that. So Penn State's really, really loading up on defensive back here. Bigger picture, it doesn't ruin anything that Penn State has been prioritizing. They did make a strong push for someone like Dorian Barney, but I got to say, if I'm being honest, I don't think they land him. I still like their chances a lot for guys like Khary Adams and Joey O'Brien, who very well could both be 5-star players. 5 stars. Not going to change anything there. All right, let's wrap up this show talking about the class of 2026 overall, just like we've done in the past. Go through and talk about what Penn State still needs, who they're targeting, when those next commitments could happen. That is all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Could Penn State land another commitment out of this official visit weekend? They got things started with Amauri Polydor. They could definitely add another one. I've seen some predictions here for defensive end Tyson Harley, Gonzaga High School. That's where Olu Fashanu went. He is also teammates with another coveted prospect in this class of 2026, and that is Carter Meadows. If you get Tyson Harley, that might be a step in the right direction to potentially get Carter Meadows. Now, Meadows is teetering on being a consensus 5-star. I think he will when these rankings are finalized at this point. On 3 has him very highly rated. They have him as a top 10 player in the nation. And just as I think Rivals is a little behind, they have him as a 205th. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy here. Top 250 according to one site, top 10 according to another. It's just he very well might be the best pure pass rusher in this class of 2026. So Tyson Harley is somebody that is potentially on commitment watch here for the Nittany Lions. I like their chances. If it happens over the weekend, awesome. That's great. You get another edge defender. If it doesn't, if it happens a little later, okay, so be it. But Carter Meadows, Luke Wafel is somebody to definitely keep an eye on. Younger brother of Owen Wafel, who is currently a defensive tackle for Penn State. I can't see Penn State losing this one because of the relationships they have with the Wafel family, but Florida's not going to make this easy. Ohio State's not going to make this easy. Texas, this is a national recruitment here. Luke Wafel, I still think all signs point to Penn State, but never say never. I do hold my reservations because those schools are going to be very aggressive in this recruitment. Jackson Ford, for a while, he is another edge defender listed at 6'3", 240, consensus 4-star, about a top 200 overall prospect in the nation. And in state, in Pennsylvania, you want to land his commitment as well. Now, is Deion Barnes going to try to load up at defensive end? We just saw what happened to Max Granville. You obviously can tell you can never have too many defensive ends in this case. Pass rushers, guys that are just disruptive. You already have 3 defensive line commitments. Brian Smith and I, Locked On Recruiting Expert, had talked about how this was the weekend for Penn State to really push its defensive line recruiting forward. That's how you do it. There's also defensive tackles, Keyshawn Stancil. Penn State has prioritized him. I would say that is one of the most important defensive tackles for Penn State's recruitment. And then Damari Simeon. Now, if you can land those 2 or at least one of them, I think the defensive tackle's taken care of between Isaac Chukara, Alex Haskell. He's kind of a tweener. He could be a strong side defensive end or he could be a defensive tackle. If he ends up being a defensive end, okay, then you go after. You make sure that you push for both Stancil and Simeon. But Penn State this weekend is going to be pivotal because you very well might be able to take care of defensive line recruiting in one veiled sweep. Now, for the rest of the class of 2026, it's up to how many commitments are we at? We are at, for Penn State, if I can get this, 19. We are at 19 in my notes. 19 commitments. You have offensive line, I think, still needs to add another commitment or 2. I think Phil Troutwine will be up to the task. Penn State wants to take about 4 or 5 offensive linemen here. Tight end, I'm intrigued to see. Penn State doesn't need one in this cycle because they had 3 in 2025. So it is okay if Penn State does not land a tight end. They're good at quarterback. Running back, I would like to see them add somebody like a Brian Bonner over on the West Coast, even though that recruitment leans UCLA, potentially Washington. We had an episode with Locked On Huskies to talk about that. So they're good at quarterback. They got 2 quarterbacks in this class. They have 3 wide receivers. They definitely would look to add a 4th. They're not going to not take a tight end, but it's not necessarily a priority unless it makes sense for the prospect. I would say that Penn State needs another linebacker, another offensive lineman, defensive line. This is the weekend to really make some waves for defensive line recruiting. And then this class really has taken shape. You have the outlook. Do they add another player or a prospect down the road later in the cycle after the summer? Possibly, but Penn State's going to take care of, I think, 95% of this here between now and July, and then maybe 1 or 2 other players sort things out in September, October. But Penn State wants to get this taken care of now as soon as possible. So expect more commitments here over the course of June and July. And we're going to be reacting to all of it, bringing you the latest news and analysis around Penn State football recruiting and so much more. As always, thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Friendly reminder to put your thoughts down in the comments section, be a part of the conversation, and for the latest around all things Penn State sports, football recruiting, wrestling, basketball, you name it, it is all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.